start and we'll go ahead.
Hey, Manoj.
We are at 2:45. I think we should start the session. Let me formally welcome all the panelists. We have this on future of operating systems in entertainment convergence being moderated by Mr. Biren Ghosh. He is the Vice Chairman of CII National Committee on Media and Entertainment, to the country head of Technicolor India. Panelists in this session are Mr. Vidwans, Global Head of Cable Media and Entertainment at TechMahindra, Mr. Srikanth G. Rao, Associate Director of Media, Software and Platforms Industry Practice at Accenture. Shortly, we will be joined by Mr. Vikram Sahai, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. But I request Mr. Biren Ghosh to please start the session.
Thank you. Can I get a thumbs up if I'm audible to everyone, please?
Yes, you are.
Wonderful. So this is a wonderful panel, and really honored and delighted to welcome my fellow panelists. We've had a brief conversation in the last couple of days, and I can tell you that I was both excited and inspired about they're looking at the future from the lens of where we are in 2020, which has been a year that's made everybody think about everything that they're doing and actively in what I would call a natural state of disruption. So we've had at the big picture many events over the last 9 years of its existence. And in that time, we've been talking about creativity and we've been talking about technology. And I think this is a great moment in the journey of media and entertainment when we're no longer going to be talking about and or because everything is kind of coming together in an indistinguishable way as we move forward. So without further ado, I'm going to request Srikanth and Manoj to make opening statements about what they are seeing in their world, both as captains of industry in their own organization, but also besides that, the people who have a kind of a pulse, a ear to the ground on how these blurring lines can actually become something that we should leverage for the next paradigm. In the morning session, Srikanth and Manoj, Mr. Madhavan, the chair of our committee, the National Media and Entertainment Committee of CII, and of course the head of Star and Disney, made the bold statement that we should be looking at a 4x growth in our revenues in our industry over the next 5 years. And from that perspective, I think this is a great conversation of where the platforms and the enablement that technology is providing can help to catapult this industry, both in the conventional sectors, but also we're seeing a huge new emerging paradigm that I know Srikanth, you and Manoj are going to cover. So if I can please kick off with Manoj to make a few opening comments about what he's got in store for us in this conversation, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'll come to Srikanth, right? And thereafter we will wait for Mr. Vikram Sai or carry on and bring him in as he comes into
He's just joined. Biren has just joined, Mr. Vikram Sai.
Excellent. So Manoj, why don't you let me just see if I can see. Mr. Sai. Mr. Sai, very good afternoon and welcome to this session. We just introduced the subject and really delighted and honored to have you here. The morning started off with the notes from the minister and from the secretary, and we spoke of the role of facilitation by the government. But I think this session is going to change that role. You are no longer a facilitator. You are a part of us. We are talking about where creativity and technology are facilitating each other, and all of us are contributors, to that stream. So, with those words, if I might invite Manoj to make his opening comment, and followed by Srikanth, then so you'll get a little bit of a context also in terms of where this panel is coming from, and we'd love to bring you into the conversation and get your vision and your views. I know you come from deep experience in this convergence space. So thank you so much for joining us again. Yeah. Over to you, Manoj, just to make those opening comments, and then to Srikanth. Please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Brian. Hope I'm audible enough and perfect. Thank you. That works. So can't echo more the comments you made, Brian, at the opening, and usually appreciate this opportunity, and also trying to use this as much as a learning as sharing my views. Appreciate Mrs. Sai taking the time out of his schedule and joining us in this session. So hopefully we'll get to hear some interesting comments and get some value addition from that as well. But just to kick off my thought process, Brian, I think you did mention something which is probably convergence, which is the headline message of this plenary. I would just expand the definition into including, while there is convergence happening at the rapid pace, we are also seeing collaboration and competition like never before, right? So what I mean by that, convergence is, while it's taking its time and it's happening and is obvious, I think collaboration with completely new ecosystem players, somebody who we would have not thought to be a part of this larger industry being involved going forward. At the same time, competitive forces. I mean, we keep hearing news, and I just want to touch upon a very interesting nugget that you and I spoke of, is something that a large studio like a Warner Media has decided to stream all its blockbusters as they go to the theaters. Now, something which, and we lived in the world of windowing, theatrical followed a year, etc. This is a different world suddenly, and the sort of joint at the hip theatrical owners and studios are actually competing for that same share of time, share of wallet, etc. So that's going to be very interesting as it plays out. So the other comments I'll reserve for later, but I think we are seeing a definite and a dramatic change as we're going forward.
Thank you very much for those words. I think one of the signs of maturity in any industry is when the actors, the players in those industries learn to come together, particularly in addressing the government and policy. And they learn, the maturity shows when they can compete at one level for market share, but on the other hand, they can collaborate in order to make their pie larger, to make the country share larger, and in that competitive nature. So very, very great, very good opening comments. Thank you. I'd like to come to you, Srikanth, for your opening comments, please, and then we'll go further from there. Thank you.
Thanks, Viren. Trust I'm audible. Good afternoon to you, to my fellow panelists, and everyone who is, watching this virtually. Like the times, we might have been in a physical environment like a CII event, much larger space with much larger infrastructure. But right now we've been forced by pandemic. But what is also amazing is it's also enabled by technology, which has helped us to work without having to stop, without having to collaborate, without having to converse and come together for an event like this, right? So in a way, like the technology enablement has extended further, and that's probably the biggest thing that I see playing out with the theme of convergence, where there is multiple level of convergence that's happening as we speak. For a media and entertainment, there's a convergence between a last mile connectivity provider like a telco and the media. There's a convergence of how do you take from a typically like a B2B to C, from a typical broadcast environment to more a direct to consumer. Now, with this direct to consumer comes a really paradigm shift, of how do I really not just provide entertainment, but additional services. Can I be like a additional service provider? And what more apart from delivering my content? And there are multiple levels of convergence that will happen, whether it's happening, whether it's gaming, whether it's interactivity, and education, right? It'll extend and play further. I think it's an exciting space of convergence. The jury is still out, as to how many levels of plays this will have. But yes, the convergence really is at play. And talking about playing together, we have already seen how telcos are coming together to really make it friendly for the users to consume, at the same time enabling the businesses, the OTT players to bundle together. So definitely convergence is going to go much bigger, and the ecosystem and this pie is going to get much bigger. And connecting back to what Madhavan would have said, I'm not at all surprised that this will be quadrupling in the coming years.
Thank you, Srikanth, for those opening comments. And I think the viewers should know that that Manoj and Srikanth collectively represent two major powerhouses, Tech Mahindra and Accenture, and they're as large as they are. Even if you talked about media and entertainment, there are many flavors and different parts of their business that address. And I had this wonderful conversation, with Srikanth about Accenture Technologies versus what they do in interactive versus what they do in other areas. So it is actually the reason I bring that up of these companies and how they address the market in different ways is just to show that there are so many different flavors that it's even impossible for one company to address the entire convergence space or the media, entertainment, telecom space through one lens. This brings me to our honored guest, Mr. Vikram Sai. Thank you again. So we see that you have a very difficult task in government of being the accelerator with one foot, but sometimes also having to put a brake with the other foot for good reason, for the fact that you represent the interests of the citizens of our country. And hopefully in this conversation, we will also be together pressing a clutch and gearing up and gearing down, because I think that's where we can control the thrust and the power that we require for the engine under our hood to move forward in the direction of the 4x growth that we are looking for. On this note, sir, I'd request you to make some opening comments, but may I just put a few points ahead for you to look at. When we now look at enabling policy, sir, when we're looking for the fact that there is more and more user-generated content, it was okay if a censor board has to censor as 800 films, the task, what you have to do and who has to do it. And then when we get into other forms, like in the advertising world, I think the regulation has been a self-regulating body where the government keeps an eye on the AAAI, the association, saying, okay, we want you to take note of the fact that you kind of have crossing the line here, and we will bring issues to you, or vice versa. But now we have the new world of the streamers, as we call them, the OTT and the streaming platforms, and we're trying to figure out, as Mr. Khare said this morning, how do we keep all content should have a similar playing field, etc. So I think that's one point, is about how do you press the brake and accelerate on that. And the other is, as new forms of media evolve, sir. I mean, right now we are seeing the lack of clarity, if I may say so, because our country is new to gaming versus gambling versus in-app monies in games versus esports coming up and so on. So maybe forums like the CII, and this could be a topic for an entirely separate conversation, but I think your views on this from the point of view of the government and how we could provide with you with inputs, white papers, panels, committees, regulating mechanisms is something that would be love to hear from you.
Thank you so much for having inviting me. As always, Nirja, I'm always confirming at the last moment. Sorry for that. Even till about 10 minutes back, she was not knowing whether I'm joining in or not. But that is how we are. As you can see, I'm sitting in my office. A lot of papers behind me. So I don't have the pleasure of the big CII banner behind me, which was in the last 2 years. But we all here in office and things are a bit busy. And well, it's not that the industry is keeping us busy. We are busy for several reasons. And I was happy when you made your initial comment that our honorable minister and our secretary talked about facilitator, and now you want me to be part of you. So for a change, I thought I'm not going to speak anything on government policy and regulation. But in your last part of your comment, you expect me to speak a bit on that. Well, there have been, we have been discussing this OTT thing and self-regulation now for quite some time, more than a year. And frankly, all of you who are aware have been following what government has been doing. We started the conversation in the month of November last year. And we started with a very open mind in Bombay. And when we said that, well, let the industry come together, make up its mind how they want to self-discipline themselves. And that has been the underlying theme and substance of what we have been saying since then. And that has not changed. Even after this the so-called allocation of business rules which came in, and that created a bit of concerns, etc. But really, that is only to put in place some internal functioning within the government. It has nothing to do with the industry as such. So we still believe, and we are, I think I can say that industry, and I have spoken at a few forums as well, that industry has behaved very responsibly and taken into account people's sensibilities when they looked at content coming on OTT platforms and even on other digital media. So we are very closely following what's happening. We are trying to work upon certain models, but we are also very conscious of the fact that digital world is a universal world. It is not a physical geographical world bound by boundaries of a state or of a geography. So what happens in India affects what happens abroad. We would not like anything which creates apprehensions for our businessmen to grow out or to create apprehensions in the international level. So we have to be very compliant in terms of what and consistent with what's happening globally. And that is what we are trying to look at. What is happening in the global sphere is something which we are trying to understand. We have, in fact, I have also requested a few people in the industry to let me know what are the global practices and what we as industry, we as government, and as regulators learn from that. So these are my initial remarks. And as the time goes, I'll discuss a few more things, our concerns, etc. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sai, for those opening statements. We'd also want to not just to talk about government and policy, but we treat you as a shoulder-to-shoulder partner in talking about convergence itself. I spent many visits going back many years in your office during the time of Mr. Pramod Mahajan and Sushma Swaraj in INB. We were discussing a convergence bill. And you can see that now we are, many years later, about almost 1.5 decades, 2 decades later, we are seeing convergence having arrived without any bill. And now we are talking about how do we make this happen even further. And it's not about whether we should fall between those two chairs. I think the important thing is that we have actually created two very powerful forces. I think in a sense, if you look across all of these spaces of media entertainment, we have 7 subcommittees in the media entertainment, committee of CII, from broadcasting to print to OTT, etc., right? Music and so on and so forth. And more importantly now, the new digital sectors like, animation, visual effects and games and so on and so forth. And I think the important thing is that while they have different priorities, different issues, and CII is a great platform to engage with you, but at the same time, the one thing that is common across everyone is looking at 5G, or everyone is looking at cloud computing, or everyone is looking at storage, everyone is looking at delivery. So the creep of technology happens even with these very isolated or slightly disparate functions from one another. And to that point, I would like to bring in this time Shrikant to talk a little bit about this experience differentiation and the things that are happening in the world that he's looking at. Yeah. You're on mute.
Hope I'm clear now. Yeah. So experience differentiation itself is a very big theme and an area, right? And when we talk to our clients and in the market, when we go and look at, Experience is disrupted not just by your competition but also what we call perceptual competitors, right? Today, as a consumer, when he's looking at experience, he's not just comparing an OTT with an OTT. He may be comparing an OTT with a like a ride-hailing Uber, right? So experience really matching up to customer experience really becomes very very important, right? Um, and here, where we've seen that some of the people who have born digital have had the advantage of not having any baggage, and hence, they've adopted much more naturally to technology and they have sped fast, right? That's where there is always a comparison with, hey, how do I do it like Netflix, right? But at the same time, someone who is traditional, if he needs to match up to that customer experience, they also carry a baggage of their existing systems. How do they, carry that along? Because they cannot just throw away everything that they have. And hence, comes, how do I grow a step up approach? And you spoke about several different sort of aids, I would say, right? And technology is an enabler here, right? And plays the vital and pivotal role here to bring in that experience. And when we talk about experience again, it opens up, different pieces here. Now, whether it's about cloud, whether it's how do I leverage machine learning, AI, and when we look at these enablers, the way we sort of advise to our clients is don't just look at cloud or technology to merely say that it's going to get you cost savings, right? Or as a capex to opex. It's not merely one lens, right? It has to look at how do you really future proof your business models as well, because the technology has to enable to go multifold, right? When we look at every single digital native player, they're not bringing in technology for the sake of it. They are bringing in more from how does it enable those business models, right? And hence, we look at these technologies to not just power the experience layer, but experience layer will have several sub layers to it. One of the layer being the ecosystem, right? And this is a topic that you spoke earlier on. How does really opening up or open ecosystems really enable a much bigger model and a play for users? I mean, we've seen that when you enable a much more open platforms, really not just brings in a way to harness what you have, but also what the partner brings with, right? Or all the players around the ecosystem bring with. And a very good example here is TikTok. Although for various reasons it's not in play, but truly that's one learning that we can take, is that how it carved out a completely new area of short form content to really engage with customers, right? So I would say definitely experience is enabled by technology, but this will have several sub layers, like how does a cloud really play a role? How does cloud enable the ecosystems around you to make it much more open platforms, and thereby it's like a circle, and thereby adding in back to experience, to bringing in rich experiences. And all this, definitely, when I say cloud, it's not just about microservices or particular one or two services, but really a gamut of technologies that comes with it. Whether it's the machine learning, artificial intelligence, the way you will manage your large amount of data. How do you securely with privacy, handling the privacy well? How do you really reach your customer and ensure that they get the experience, but without having to compromise about security?
Thanks. Those are two really good insights and snapshots into the experience economy and therefore what that means, and the ecosystem as well. If I might come to you, Manoj, telcos have always been the ones that have driven the connectivity of, if you like, enabling at least voice or data to move between points, and all the statistics of how many mobile phones we have and how we are connected in India are now oft quoted as one of our strengths, right? A question for you is, I remember walking into the office of Orange at that time called Orange, in Mumbai, and Balu Ayur was their first CTO. And I was at UTV trying to talk about interactive and streaming at that time, thinking broadband will come in a year or two, and it's still arrived much later. But Balu told me we are all about voice, and we don't really understand why you want to put games and streaming media and content on this stuff. And later they had a manager value-added services after 4 or 5 years, not very senior, trying to do this other stuff than voice. Right now, how things have changed since those days. But more to the point now, with 5G, that is going to be a game changer for sure. Where do you see the opportunity and the playing field at large with telcos who so far have had not been content players, right? They've been more the pipes. And I would like to come later on to request some comments from Mr. Vikram Sahay also on how we can use this platform now to make India a scalable platform for huge international reach and opportunity. But would you like to talk about that, and allied to that, anything else that you believe can actually expand the pie?
Sure. I mean, that's not just a billion, but a billions-dollar question, right? I mean, it's something that how the future plays out depends on how a lot of these players sort of start owning up content, so to say, as being front and center as a part of the strategy. And it's almost like a 180 degree from the time that you mentioned where it was value added. Now it's value. There is no addition. It's core value, right? So that to me is a fundamental difference. Nowhere better in the world do we have an example in the form of, say, a Reliance Jio, where, to again use another quote, sometimes the consumer doesn't know about the need, right? The need is there, the need is latent. And Steve Jobs said that, and he proved that with the entire iPhones and the allied ecosystem. What we see similarly is Jio doing that, and what we would continue to see that is also happening in the 5G world. I think one fundamental thing to this, and the point you also alluded to earlier, is probably a lot of them missed the bus earlier by not anticipating the pace at which the digital natives would move, right? Which is the point Srikanth was making earlier. They were caught, to use the word, napping, and didn't realize that, lo and behold, suddenly the consumer's pie has been taken away by somebody else who's actually using their entire infrastructure end to end. And to me, it's an opportunity. I mean, these are cycles that keep coming by. So as 5G unfolds, and it will take different shapes and sizes, I'm sure, there is the one entire enterprise side of 5G, which is a completely different set of applications and how that would go. But from a consumer point of view, even today, if you look at it, probably almost all the telecom operators know their consumer inherently better than anybody else can claim to, right? How much are they leveraging that even today is a question. But if we put that in, say, almost, Netflix box, they already have that ecosystem. Now, the question is, before 5G comes in, or as it is coming on, can they re-architect themselves, right? And it's not anything easy or simple, but fundamentally, can they reorient, re-architect themselves to put, again, going back to Srikanth, the customer experience, the CX part of it, front and center, content as a key element of it, then the entire ball game changes, right? Then they suddenly wrest the power from so-called digital natives and others. To me, that's an opportunity. How it will unfold is something that's anybody's guess, but it's a fantastic opportunity to get back control of the consumer that they lost probably for the better part of last decade. And I think just one point to add is the pandemic has actually acted as a fantastic accelerator, right? I don't think we are seeing something that nobody thought would happen, but all of us thought that this would happen 2, 3, 5 years down the line. Now in a sink or swim scenario, if you have to swim, then you are forced to make those changes, right? So which is again a fantastic opportunity where a lot of these changes are enforced and will force us to move in a certain direction. So those dynamics also will play out or are playing out as we speak.
And just to add, Biren, I think one of the most pressing lessons to the world actually is coming from India, right? And just to add to Manoj's point, if you subtly notice, or not so subtly, right? It's very obviously there. Jio does not call itself a telco. It calls itself a platform, right? And there's a very big reason to that. That's because and that's why Jio probably is a lesson out to the world to know how you can really monetize being a monetize your network than just being a dumb pipe, right? And which is the point that Manoj mentioned, that you cannot just get used to providing as an infrastructure, whereas someone else is eating your lunch, right? Now with 5G, one of the biggest things that our clients are asking us, and we are helping our clients as well, is in understanding and helping them how do they realize devise their business model as well as the monetization, so that they don't merely become a commodity. 5G does not become a commodity, and there are several sort of plays at it, right? There's a consumer angle as to how do they provide services which are much elevated with EMBB, or the additional bandwidth that comes in with 5G, or the near zero latency, which will help a lot more on the on the manufacturing or on the industrial IoT side. But 5G for media, of course, is going to be exciting, because what it will bring is several of newer experiences. And just to touch upon one of the things that Manoj mentioned, the anecdote that he mentioned around the studios trying to sort of release first day first show on a streaming. They are also asking, some of our clients that we're talking, they're also asking, while you watching alone is good, but people are really also missing those experiences of being together, right? How do you bring in virtual environments of watching together? How can you not just be watching but also bring in experiences around shopping, around dining? Because movie going is not just about just going and watching a movie, but everything around it, right? And they are looking at this space, and this connects back to the theme that I mentioned about how you can become an ecosystem player around providing all those services along with content. And 5G is going to enable that.
Yeah, I'm going to request the CII team helping us here to field any questions and feed them into the chat box if that's if there are some good questions. We have about 1150 or 1200 people that are logged in, so that's a fantastic response. I think it shows the power of the three panelists that we have here together with me, that this is going to be a topic for future of great present and future relevance. Mr. Sai, I'd like to ask you a theoretical question about whether we can look together with the government at a possibility of a large infrastructure platform play for the country. Because when we talked about the clients approaching these, two stalwarts here at individual company capacities, they're global clients, some of them are local clients. But I think what Jio will bring about is fantastic, because it will create a lot of independent content creators, independent gamers coming on to it, not waiting only for the big publishers to bring content. And right from our Prime Minister to the Minister and Mr. Khare have talked about the fact that Indian gaming, I think, is going to be a very different story. To the point made by our panelists about things like the stadiums of the future are today virtual, right? And Google's acquisition of Stadia, and there are 3-4 others who've done it before. This is the shared experience. I mean, I think Manoj and Shrikant referred to it in one sector. But if you look today at esports, there are people who follow esports specialists, not just play themselves. There are people who follow the top esports player in 94 competitions has won $3.5 million till now, and people go to watch him because he's so good at that game. So it's changing the way in which I think this happens. But back to the question, sir. if we were to create a very strong infrastructure with 4 or 5 hubs, and we mentioned this also at the inauguration to Mr. Khare, and I know that's also a consideration within the ministry to some extent. The digital players in India will be able to use this as a platform for growth. So, for example, in the AVGC sector, 75 to 80% of all our revenues come from exports. And of course, the local market is picking up with the experience that we gain from the global play. But the global play that we are in right now is not even 1% of the market. So we should be competitive as a nation, and companies individually, except for the large ones like Reliance, can't afford the capex that's involved in creating this platform. But similar to how other ministries look at creating roads and highways and railway and ports, this is the hubs are our equivalent of those highways and ports and so on and so forth, where basically we will be in a position to leverage that and get several participants from the small, medium, and large sector. And today, with the hybrid model of what we've learned through the pandemic, where people are working at home and collaborating on creating content, which did not happen before, those hubs will open up a huge hub and spoke model for tier 2, tier 3 towns in the length and breadth of India, sir. So if there's any way of us coming forward together as a whole industry, together with yourself, with a CII as a platform, for example, to create this the port, as I would call it, the port and the highways, right, of creating a much larger play that would enable us to even exceed what we are looking at as a 4 times growth. Because if you look at AVGC, it has grown at 35 to 45% consistently for 10 years, but it started as only 2% of India's M&E. And today it's 11% of India's M&E. So I think while the domestic market is going to have these fantastic opportunities, we shouldn't lose our eye on the fact that the tailwinds today, from a job creation point of view, from so on, so on. We had these conversations that our industry came into the STPI kind of phase at the sunset time of that industry. When STPI's reliefs for the IT industry were already reached its sunset period. So can we not think of those kinds of, once again, the new STPI, and they have the infrastructure to enable us to work with you, to put the capex together for these hubs and really make a play, because that's the Convergence is all about a platform that people can come in and build their shops on and their offerings on in a much bigger way. So would you like to give us some thoughts on that?
I mean, you're absolutely correct, and we would really welcome this, that industry comes together and we create in a very facilitating role. The government just for a while forgets what is regulation and what is laws, and we work upon a system in a collaborative manner, and a system or what you call a platform where a large number of players can participate, and gives a platform not only for the big players, but also for the small and medium players who can come together and try to tell the entire world about the type of talent which we have. Already, OTT, we know that because of the large number of small or short films or big films that have been produced, or web series which have been produced and shown on OTT has shown the potential of a large number of producers, writers, directors, actors, singers, and so many other technicians. So the possibilities are unbound, the potential is unbound, and we are making a beginning in terms of having a center of excellence, and we are working towards that in animation, gaming, and comics. And I think there the participation of the industry will be very important. And these online gaming and online digital platforms have now, now that is something which is there for us to work together. And I think that's a very welcome step, and we would definitely work towards it. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience that I'd like any of the panel members to pick up. I think we partly covered it. So we talked about 5G and the kind of convergence that it would bring, but there's a specific question from the audience. It says, and I'll read it: how long will we have to wait for this convergence being talked about that has been a distant dream to become a reality, and for actually that to be there amongst all of us in a usable form?
So if I can take a stab, I think convergence is upon us, right? I mean, if we see it all around,
yeah.
How much in the past did we imagine watching at least 20 OTT platforms on our television screens, right? That's really the proof. The kind of content that gets served on mobile screens, the internet users in India, right now, this is so many things coming together as convergence, right? I mean, there are various ways in which you can define convergence, but this is clearly one of them. And I think, the point that you made earlier around Mr. Madhavan talking about that 4x growth really stems from the fact that the industry is confident that the direction is right. I mean, if you look at even 3, 4, 5 years back, how many companies, large or small, were willing to invest their bottom dollar on a direct to consumer business? Today, there are, as many as you can count, right? So that's clearly a testament, and that's only going to accelerate. So there is no like a fixed, kind of milestone that, oh, convergence has started. It's happened and it's accelerated. That's the way at least I see it.
I'd like, thank you very much. I'd like Shrikant to talk about, how this has enabled the, library competition, if that's the word I could use, and you're seeing that from your technology business, right? As you consult with clients, maybe you can talk about how that's already arrived thanks to 5G and stuff happening. You're on mute.
Sorry. Convergence is already upon us, right? I mean, rightly said by Manoj, I mean, it's already playing. I mean, how much did you anticipate that just to watch your OTT, you will not pay the OTT subscription? You're actually paying your telco, right? It's already there, right? It's already happening, right? Moment you recharge your mobile phone, you're getting OTT subscriptions, right? Now that's already a convergence at play. And apart from that, just to touch upon, the library competition that I say, right? And this is something that the media has realized, and at least in India, they've realized early, much early, whereas in the US and Europe, they have realized it a little late, in terms of going directly to the consumer, right? When I say library competition, the studios and the broadcaster really, thought that they're really the differentiation or the moat, as I call, is really the content, right? And their library, large library, and the unique library that they possess. The moment actually the shift and turning point was House of Cards, that Netflix put on, and there's a long story behind it as to, House of Cards was supposed to go to a studio and then it went to Netflix. But that pretty much changed everything, and original content itself, right? From 2020, this year, right, and this we predicted in our research almost in 2018, right? The amount of investment that's happening on original content is equally by digital natives as it is by a traditional studio. In fact, it's going to surpass in 2022. They'll be investing much more than a traditional, studio or a broadcaster, which means that library no longer is your moat or a differentiation, right? And hence you need to compete more on technology, and comes back to all those parts that we said, as to how do you have an edge using technology to provide better experience. How do you really leverage ecosystem enabled by technology to expand your horizon, your partnerships, and your, including your certain business models, because that's where, what I anticipate and see is that media especially is not just going to derive its revenue from advertising and subscription, but there will be at least 2 to 3 more, ways of revenue that will add them, in the near future, that we will see, especially powered by the ecosystem. And that's where much of the revenue is going to come from, with all the, regulatory stranglehold, truly so, that comes in with privacy and everything else. Already advertising is seeing a stress, right? And much of those, newer streams of revenue is what is going to come, and aid this 4x growth.
Before I come to Mr. Sahay again, I was thinking about the fact that, we have a lot of, and we talked about this in our opening comments also. There is a censorship when it comes to user-generated content or content. There is snooping when it comes to content, and there is compliance when it comes to content. Now, these give course to a lot of healthy and unhealthy debate. Can we use technology in order to generate, these answers for us? That, hey, this is, we will allow people to do what we want, but we will have technology creeping over it to tell us that here are the red flags and here is what we should. And since you guys are in the business of helping to create these enabling technologies for content creators, studios, etc., can you not, for industry and the government jointly, come up with technology that makes sure that it is safe and the snooping is not happening? Can you make sure that it is, not violating some of the four corners of the censorship or whatever you want to call it? Yeah. And also that it complies with, certain things like children's content. Automatically, you can have something creeping over it to make sure that or bad language or whatever the case. Technology can easily do this. I mean, why has it not happened, and what can you guys suggest to Mr. Sahay about how it should?
Surely, I can pick up two things that you mentioned. One is, how do we disable or strangle the bad actors, right? There are always, good actors and bad actors in the market. And how do we, dissuade and block the bad actors, right? And here, what we've definitely seen is that and industry plays a really vital role, and not just as an organization. I'll just take an example, right? We've seen people like Facebook and other large platforms coming together, right, including the Microsoft Bing and others, right, where they rely on a collaborated way of looking and flagging the CSAM, right, which is around child pornography and all the bad stuff around child pornography, and they pretty much exchange using the data that they've seen to flag others, right? So that it's a collaborated way of trying to filter out such content so that it doesn't hit the user. The second aspect that I want to talk, and you can start looking at an industry wide way, and there are effective ways today enabled with blockchain where you don't have to really expose every, the fear is I don't want to expose my good content along with the bad content, right? So how do we use technologies like blockchain to really enable sort of distributed ledger to really have a hashing mechanism around videos to flag the video that you have seen moment the same video hits, let's say, a user generated content on another platform. It sort of flags that this has already been seen and it may seem to be violating. Then it at least then people are not repetitively doing that and helping them plug the bad content out. Now, the other part that is around the user data and privacy, and there are much stringent laws that we've seen, whether it's GDPR and other there are data regulations that are coming to India as well, and these are good things to have, right? While that said, when we look at entertainment and especially advertising being a core source of revenue, personalization together with this becomes very important. How do we look at providing personalization without invading the privacy, right? There can be personalization, but they need not have to be indulging into invading on your privacy. And especially with cookies being going away, there will be a lot of walls, I would say, to really provide that. And we are working on several of our own assets and accelerators to look at how do we sort of bring in personalization without having to invade privacy. And there are several discussions that we're having where how do we anonymize data, not just by storing it, but also when you're sort of serving a recommendation or personalizing it, how do you make it much more nearest to the user? At the same time, you're not involving in any sort of a data privacy that's being compromised.
Thank you. Mr. Sahay, would you like to comment on whether you think this is the right time to look at technology to help us to reduce the noise sometimes on debate and who does what and what the censors are right or the filmmaker is right or the storyteller's rights are. I mean, there is a lot of we can understand the legitimacy of the argument on both sides, but sometimes it would be easier to just create create a rule-based technology-enabled thing so that 70% of it is just happening automatically, and 10, 20, 30%, which is maybe in a gray area or somebody has a right to appeal, and we can fast track that, and it can be either agreed or disagreed. Do you think that this is the right time with the explosion of data and number of people who create contents no longer in the tens or hundreds or thousands? Now it's going to be in the millions, tens of millions, and shortly hundreds of millions. So it can't be a manual effort. It's like when people have to move away from Excel sheets, they have to move away from it. So similarly here, we have to move away from the way of recording or arbitrating each of these things. What is your view, sir?
Well, this is a very, very serious issue. I can tell you. Up till now, we have been, whether any type of regulation we had on print or TV was for a very limited space and for a very limited numbers. And there can be various ways of looking at it, how well the government has done it or not done it. That is not the issue.
Right.
The issue is today when you are looking at digital media, which has a universal reach. And as Shrikant was mentioning, how do we differentiate between good, bad, and ugly? Yeah. And if technology can do it, I think government would be the happiest as far as we are concerned. Because we also feel that it may be very good to prepare law. It is the easiest is to have a law.
That's right.
The most difficult part is how do you implement a law which is perceived in a manner where everybody feels, well, the law is being properly implemented and it is equitous for everybody. It is not that the law is trying to favor one over the other, big over the smaller. If you're able to use a technology which is agnostic to all these big, small, big and small and medium, it would be the best thing which can happen. Where a technology can very well decipher whether this is in prohibition of law, whether it is in compliance to law. If that can be done, if you can send some alarms, it will be very good. I just saw today a friend of mine posted a few pictures of an honorable MP, honorable member of parliament, on Facebook with some very snide, indecent remarks. Now, probably unofficially I can tell you what happened. Now, if I were Facebook, I would have questioned that user. Why do we have still so many bots on Twitter? Why do we have some of the OTT platforms which have no age rating, and yet they are showing contents whose titles are unmentionable? We have to, as industry, if a technology offer is there, the government would be happiest to take it. Please offer this technology, whether it is Tech Mahindra or anybody else. The other important aspect is when you are trying to work on a technology or a law, there has to be no information asymmetry. Everybody from the top to the bottom should be equally understandable about the law. The other day you saw we gave out some advisory on online gaming advertisements. Now, when we went to ASCII and ASCII said, we do not understand what is a violation of law or what is compliant to law. It is an organization, but it says we cannot differentiate. Now, this is the challenge for self-regulation or co-regulatory model. Can industry itself understand what is law, compliance to law in terms of content? If it is able to understand and use technology to sheen out those, it would be wonderful. And we can work it out. And I just put it as a proposal. Please work it out. Let there be blinkers. Let there be red flags. Let there be an automatic takedown. By use of technology, we would not require to put it in print in black and white. Or to that extent, there will be no requirement of black and white. So, so that is my take on it, and we would be very happy if we work towards that.
So thank you. You've given us the idea to have a specific working group and maybe a workshop dedicated to this, and we'll try to do that in the Q1 of next year. The first 3 months of
and this can be an action, Viren, of course.
We'll come back to you once we finish an internal workshop, and we will come back with a wider industry support of a set of recommendations on the subject. So thank you very much for accepting that thought as something to come back to you, and thank you for that. I'd like to come to the closing remarks, if I may, and I will start with Manoj. Manoj, if you wanted the audience to go away from this conversation with one or two takeaways or thoughts to think about, that okay, I came to the future of operating systems and entertainment, and I heard the three gentlemen, talk about this future. What should they be thinking about uppermost in their mind, and what do you think is the takeaway that you have from this conversation that we had?
So, firstly, I think very interesting, and I really appreciate the fact that Mr. Sahai mentioning extremely proactive and willing approach to governance, if I were to put a simpler word rather than regulation or any such thing. And it's something very critical. I mean, we see the challenges all around us. But if I go back and look at, what is it that is the way forward? I think from the theme of the session, I would call it, reimagining pretty much everything. And I'm just trying to sum and distill the conversation in a manner where to sort of thrive and succeed, reimagining is critical. I mean, you have to reimagine your business model, your operating model. You have to become an asset-light company, right? These are paradigm shifts in a sense. And like I said earlier, some of it accelerated by the pandemic, but there's no going back. There is no going back to where we were 12 months back. It's only forward. And companies who will take advantage of this, I think becoming asset light or lighter also means moving faster. So they will actually take advantage of moving to the white spaces and take a majority of the pie, will be really the way to go forward for a lot of us and all of us, right? So I've taken a slightly different sort of still view, but I think that's probably my sort of summary from the session.
That's really thoughtful, and thank you for that. I think it's a good take from the conversation that we've had. If I can come to Shrikant we've had a great conversation. We already have agreed for some takeaways for us to follow up on. But I think from the point of view of the larger audience, what would you like people to think about as they leave this session?
I think, one is the convergence is already at play, right? So you don't have to think that, it's going to come sometime in the future, right? Convergence is already at play. There will be much more, converged play that we will see, with several of the new forms of players that will come into the arena. We didn't even touch upon how things like because one of the mediums of entertainment consumption is also WhatsApp today, right? I mean, it's not just a mode of communication. You are consuming so much more, and I bet probably you're watching more videos on WhatsApp than probably even OTT, right? But there will be newer forms of such plays that will converge together with, and for some of the audience who may be from traditional broadcast and media is to watch out. Don't just watch them as competition. How can you watch them as your partner, right? The more you watch as a partner, and that's another lesson from Jio as to how they've seen some of the digital natives, how do they partner with them. So don't just watch as your competitor. I think the world of brutal be seen as a rival and a competition is reducing by the day. I think everyone is seeing every other as a partner where they can probably grow together, win together. I think that's the true meaning of convergence, where the convergence is, we're not just talking about just telco and a media coming together and converging. There will be a larger parts of convergence that will play out, and this is just the beginning.
Thank you very much. I think before I ask Mr. Sai for comments, I'd just like to say that one of the things that has occurred to me from the conversation with the three of you here is been, I think that, and I've said this before, we are all talking about technology, but I have often said this very disrespectfully, that technology never invented anything. It was always invented by the power of ideas. Technology brought those ideas to life, and I think we talked about a few things today, right from, can we create a platform, the country as a platform, and give opportunity? Can we look at, technology in order to help with the governance, as it was, summarized at? Can we look at many things? But these require ideas, and I think it's all about the idea factor. Even content, by the way, comes from the best ideas. The films that work come from ideas, the films that don't work come from ideas. So I think that's the conversation we are having, which I think this is really a conversation about ideas more than convergence, because it's the power of these new ideas, new thoughts, and our audience today, as we've been fortunate in developing India into a country that has a larger lifespan. Our audience comprises of 3, 4 different generations, and all of them have completely different outlook to expectations and in fact even codes of conduct, including morality. So where do we put the minimum level, right? I mean, do we cater to everybody? Do we cater to 85%? And how will that today's framework change in 5 or 10 years? The other point I wanted to make to you, Mr. Sai, is also that in our industry today, we are looking at, we no longer can make any investments in media and entertainment as any company in any space that we can make a 3, 5, 7 year payback on, because the technology changes. So our hardware changes, every 2 years or 3 years, and our software changes annually at least. And therefore, I think the way in which we need to have financial models, I think, that come into helping converging entities like media and entertainment, we need to figure out methods of media financing, media technology financing, that is completely different. And that the traditional rules of how we look at depreciation and how we look at amortization and so on, they no longer apply. And this is the quandary that actually is affecting our small and medium sector, because they can neither afford the capex today, especially pandemic and post-pandemic, neither they can afford to change it as quickly as it is required to change. So I think convergence has other issues that maybe it's too short a time on one panel to discuss. But so we welcome the listening mode that your ministry has. We've always had an open door to have that access, and we want to thank you not only for your presence here today, but for the fact that we continue to dialogue with you, and had the pleasure of seeing you at a few of the CII Big Picture Summits. And next year, whether it's virtual or whether we have the real banner behind you, I think one of the benefits of this CII Big Picture 2020 is that maybe everybody who signed up to be on all the panels in these 3 days would not have been able to make the flight to Delhi or Bombay or Goa, as the case might be. So in a sense, it is richer by our participation, and hopefully even more enriched by the fact that we are looking ahead, not just in the 2 amazing reports that were released this morning, but in the quality of this conversation. So the last word appropriately, sir, to you, in terms of what are you taking away from this afternoon's conversation, and how would you like us to proceed further in the dialogue with yourself?
Thank you so much. I mean, every such session is a learning for me, and I cannot imagine how much. And I thank all of you for giving me such a good understanding of the technological world and what all things are happening and what is the special corporate. Usually, what happens traditionally, regulation changes technology, and that is where the problem lies. Now we should come out of it and work on a co-facilitating, co-regulatory technological solution. That is how we have to proceed. And I would urge upon CII and all its members to try to get a technology solution for ensuring to differentiate between the bad, good, and ugly. But my only worry is, because you are working in a world which is beyond your Indian boundaries, it should also get accepted globally, because your major intermediary platforms are global players. So when you try to bring technology for monitoring or for trying to bring some of these things, there should be greater acceptability. You need to take them along when we do it. And we would be very happy if Indian industry is able to take the lead, which is not there in any other country, to get this thing done. And thank you so much.
So I must, on behalf of CII and thank the panelists for a wonderful sharing of ideas. I think we've got the seeds of future conversations that were planted this afternoon. A great way to kick off day one with a balanced view on all of the elements of what will drive M&E in the future. And I think we not only talked about the operating systems, but I think we went into a larger context of how this can happen. So I wish all of you a very good afternoon, and thank you wholeheartedly for a very invigorating discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sahai. Thank you, Biren. Thank you, Shrikant, and thank you, Manoj, for that wonderful session. What interesting action points, what interesting ideas have come out of this, and